Hey guys, so we're getting into our week 5 of distance learning notes. I hope you guys are all doing well, and let's get started. So first we're just going to do a quick little review with the difference of perfect squares or difference of two squares. If you remember, this is what we call dots. Okay, so when A and C are both perfect squares, so when both of those are both perfect squares, if you remember, we're just going to take the square root of each of those. One's addition, one's subtraction. So the square root of 4x squared would be 2x. Square root of 9 is 3. So we make this 2x plus 3 times 2x minus 3. And that would be our answer for that one. For number 2, square root of 16x squared is 4x. Square root of 1 is just 1. So we would have 4x plus 1 times 4x minus 1. Last one, square root of 36, x squared is 6x. Square root of 25 is 5. So 6x plus 5 times 6x minus 5. And again, it doesn't matter if you did the subtraction first and then the addition. You could have made it 6x minus 5 times 6x plus 5. Either way, you were going to end up with the same answer. Okay, so moving on, looking at factoring quadratic trinomials where the leading coefficient is not 1. So if you remember when we were dealing with like the ax squared plus bx plus c and we were factoring our trinomials, if you remember, I always said right now, all you guys know is when your a is 1. So when it was always just starting with x squared. Now we're going to be looking at if it's 2x squared, 4x squared, 3x squared, negative 1x squared. Okay, so it's going to be something other than just 1. So if you remember the form for this, and I just said it, ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, that is the general form for a quadratic trinomial. So the method we are going to use, and there's different options, but the method that we're going to use is something called the British method, and we pretty much force factoring by grouping. So we're going to actually turn a trinomial into a grouping problem. And if you remember, a grouping problem always has 4 terms. You group the first 2, group the second 2, and then you factor from there. So the first thing we're going to do, and there is a typo here, this should say multiply, not multiple. So we're going to multiply A and C. So I'm going to put a box around those in this example. A is 2, C is 3. Okay, because remember, we have A, B, and C. Those are our numbers in front of the x squared, the x, and then the constant. So we're going to multiply those two numbers. Okay, so 2 times 3 gives us 6. So now I want to find the factors of 6 in this case, whose sum is whatever b is, which in this case is 7. Okay, so it's kind of similar in the sense of what multiplies to this and adds to this, but now I need to multiply A and C together first since A is something bigger than 1, and then figure out, well, what multiplies to that number that adds to B. So then I'm going to rewrite the polynomial using 2 terms instead of 1 linear term, but I need to figure out those terms. So going back to step 2, what are the factors of 6 that would add to 7? Okay, so you list the factors of 6, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. 1 and 6 are clearly the ones that would multiply to 6 and add to 7. So then this next step, rewrite the polynomial using 2 terms instead of 1 linear term. So what I'm actually going to then do is replace 7x with the 2 terms that I know add up to it. So what is that going to look like? This entire piece is going to get replaced. So 2x squared stays, plus 3 stays. Okay, both of those pieces in the front and end stay. But what changes is instead of writing 7x, I said that the factors 1 and 6 are the factors that multiply to 6 and add to 7. I am going to replace 7x with 6x plus 1x. Remember, those were the factors. 6 and 1 were the factors. And if you think about it, there's nothing different with that problem because 6x plus 1x gives me 7x. So it's just a different way of writing it. I'm expanding it out a little bit. Then my last step is I can factor By grouping. So the entire purpose of getting rid of that middle linear term, that's 7x, and replacing it with the two factors that I knew worked, that I already figured out, that's what allows me to then turn this into a grouping problem, because you need 4 terms to make it a grouping problem. So then I can take out a 2x from the first set. I'd be left with x plus 3. I can just take out a 1 in the second set. Remember, if you're just taking out a 1, you still have to write it, and I'm left with x plus 3. So then I would have x plus 3 times 2x plus 1. Now again, this method that I'm showing you is not the only way to do it. Some people just do guess and check, but I think that can sometimes be a little more complicated. But again, it's totally up to you. So that is the British method, and we're going to practice that 6 more times down here with our 6 practice problems. Okay, so let's keep going. So now we're going to factor each quadratic trinomial, still doing the same thing. In number 1, this is going to be very similar to the example problem we just did. First thing we want to do is multiply a and c. So 3 times 2 gives us 6. So we want to know what multiplies to 6 that adds to 7 in this case. We still want to know what adds to b. We literally just did that up there, so we should know that the factors are going to be 1 and 6. So then I'm going to rewrite this. And I'm going to rewrite it to look like 3x squared plus 6x plus x, or 1x, plus 2. Okay? And you can flip-flop the 6x and the x. Technically, there's no correct order. I always just tend to group it with what I think it goes better with, but there's no right or wrong order. You would still get the same answer. You just might factor out things a little differently than me. Okay, but just wait until the end and you would notice you would still end up with the same answer. So then from there, I can turn this into a grouping problem. Okay, and then I would be able to take out in this first set of parentheses a 3x. I'd be left with x plus 2. I can only take out a 1 in the second one, and I'm left with x plus 2. So then my final answer is x plus 2 times 3x plus 1. And you could always check that by going back and foiling. There's nothing saying you can't go back to FOIL. Okay, so let's look at number 2. First, need to multiply a and c. So 2 times 3 gives me 6. So what multiplies to 6 that adds to 5? So my factors of 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3. Okay, 1 and 6 are not going to add to 5. 2 and 3 will, though, however. Okay, so here I'm going to rewrite 5x with 2x and 3x. So 2x squared plus 2x plus 3x plus 3. Remember how last problem I said it didn't matter if you did 3x plus 2x, but if you notice, I'm putting the 2 with the 2, the 3 with the 3. They just kind of match up better to go that way. I can group these. First set of parentheses, I can take out a 2x. I'm left with x plus 1. Second set, I can take out a 3. I'm left with x plus 1. Final answer would then be x plus 1 times 2x plus 3. And again, you can FOIL to check to make sure you are correct. Number 3, multiply a and c first. Don't forget that negative there. That is important. So 3 times negative 10 gives me negative 30. So I want to know what multiplies to negative 30, adds to negative 13. Okay, so you think about your factors of negative 30, right? That would be negative 1 and 30, which you know no matter which way, if it's 1 and negative 30, that one's not going to work. Then you have negative 2 and 15, or you have 2 and negative 15. Negative 2 and 15 would give you positive 13. That's not good. But 2 and negative 15 would give you negative 13, so that's the one we want to use. So then again, I can go back and I can rewrite this. So here I'm going to have 3x squared plus 2x minus 15x minus 10. This one you can do either way. Again, you could have done the negative 15x first and the 2x afterwards. It would not make a difference. Then I can go ahead and group. So then I would have the first thing, I can just take out an x. So I would be left with 3x plus 2. Second set, I can take out a -5, and I would be left with 3x plus 2. So then I can go ahead, final step, 3x plus 2 times x minus 5. And that would be my final answer. Okay, going on to number 4. Of course, first step, multiply a and c together. 3 times -3 is -9. So we need to figure out what multiplies to -9, adds to +8. Okay, so you have -1 and 9. And if you actually check that, that would be our right answer. So we know that it's going to be those factors. So I can rewrite this. So 3x squared minus x plus 9x minus 3. And then I can go ahead and group from there. Again, just replacing that middle linear term of 8x with the two factors that I figured out. So from there, the first one, I can take out an x, so I'd be left with 3x minus 1. And the second set, I can take out a +3, and I'd be left with 3x minus 1. So my final answer, 3x minus 1 times x plus 3. All right, last two here. So number 5. First, multiply a and c. So 2 times -21 is -42. So I need to figure out what multiplies to -42, adds to -1. So you kind of start going through all your factors of 42. If I were you, I would almost ignore the negative for a second and just start listing your factors and then figuring out, well, if I put a negative here or a negative there, how would that kind of help me? So you have 1 and 42, you have 2 and 21, you have 3 and 14, I believe. I don't think 4 goes into it, but I could be wrong. No, 4 doesn't go into that. 5 doesn't, 6 and 7, and then that's all your factors. So you know 1 and 42 won't work. 2 and 21 won't work. 3 and 14. But 6 and 7, if you look at that, how could I combine those for them to add to -1? I could make 7 negative. So you know your factors would be 6 and -7. So then you can go ahead and rewrite it. So 2x squared plus 6x minus 7x minus 21. Go ahead and group. You can take a 2x out of the first one. You would be left with x plus 3. You can take a -7 out of the second one and be left with x plus 3. So final answer then would be x plus 3 times 2x minus 7. Okay, last problem. First thing, multiply a and c. 2 times -12 is -24. So what multiplies to -24, that adds to -5. Again, just start listing your positive factors of 24 and we can figure it out from there. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. 1 and 24 you know won't work. There's no way to combine 2 and 12 to get to -5. 3 and 8, to get to -5, you could make the 8 negative, right? Because one of them has to be negative for it to multiply to -24. So you could make the 8 negative and that would give that to you. So we know that that one would be our option. So I'm going to rewrite this. 2x squared plus 3x minus 8x minus 12. I can go ahead and group. So I'm going to be able to take an x out and have 2x plus 3. Then I can take a -4 out and I would have 2x plus 3 left. My final step would just be to factor that out. So 2x plus 3 times x minus 4. Okay, so that was factoring by forced grouping, the British method. We're obviously going to be practicing that when we have our live meeting shortly. So I will see you guys soon and just bring any questions that you guys have for me. See you soon. Bye.